She walked 500 miles for $10 a month. He hadn't smiled in 4 years. Then she arrived. The stagecoach rattled to a stop in the dusty main street of Dusty Hollow, leaving behind a cloud of brown earth that settled on everything it touched. Eleanor Morgan stepped down carefully, clutching a worn carpet bag that contained everything she owned in this world. 23 years old and completely alone. Her father had passed 6 months ago, leaving behind nothing but debts and broken promises. The boarding house where she had worked as a seamstress had closed its doors last month. Now she stood in a town she had never seen, answering an advertisement she had found crumpled in the back of an old newspaper. Housekeeper for working ranch. Must be willing to work hard. Fair wages offered. Inquire at Holden Ranch, 3 miles east of Dusty Hollow. Fair wages. Those 2 words had brought her 500 miles on trains and stagecoaches, spending nearly every penny she had saved. Fair wages meant survival. Fair wages meant eating. Fair wages meant she might finally stop running from poverty that chased her like a hungry wolf. Eleanor smoothed her traveling dress. Aware of how worn the fabric had become, she had mended the hem 3 times. The lace at her collar was yellowed despite her best efforts to keep it white. She looked nothing like a proper lady, but she had never claimed to be one. She was a worker. That was enough. The walk to Holden Ranch took nearly an hour. The road wound through golden grasslands that stretched endlessly toward mountains that kissed the afternoon sky. Eleanor had never seen country so beautiful or so lonely. Back in Missouri, houses clustered together like frightened children. Here, the land seemed to breathe with a wildness she had only read about in books. When the ranch finally appeared over a small rise, Eleanor stopped to catch her breath, not from exhaustion, though her feet ached terribly in her thin boots. She stopped because the sight before her made her heart twist, with something she had not felt in years: longing. The ranch house sat nestled against a grove of cottonwood trees, their leaves rustling silver and green in the warm breeze. A wide porch wrapped around the front, and flower boxes hung beneath windows that gleamed in the sunlight. Behind the house, a red barn rose proudly, and beyond that, fenced pastures held horses and cattle that dotted the landscape like brush strokes on a painting. It looked like a home, a real home. Eleanor had not had a real home since her mother died when she was 12. After that, there had only been rented rooms and borrowed corners, and the constant ache of belonging nowhere. She straightened her shoulders and continued walking. A man emerged from the barn as she approached. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a dusty work shirt with sleeves rolled to his elbows. His dark hair curled slightly beneath a worn hat, and when he looked up and saw her, his eyes widened with something that might have been surprise or confusion. "Can I help you, ma'am?" His voice was deep and quiet, the kind of voice that suggested he did not speak unless he had something worth saying. "I am here about the advertisement," Eleanor said, pleased that her voice remained steady for the housekeeper position. "My name is Eleanor Morgan." The man removed his hat, revealing eyes the color of strong coffee. Lines creased the corners of those eyes, not from age, but from sun and wind, and what Eleanor guessed were years of hard work. He was perhaps 30, though the weariness in his expression made him seem older. "Samuel Holden," he said slowly. "I placed that advertisement 3 months ago. Figured nobody was coming." "I came as quickly as I could manage," Eleanor replied. "The mail takes time to reach Missouri, and then there was the matter of travel arrangements." Samuel Holden studied her with an expression she could not read. His gaze moved from her worn dress to her thin boots to the carpet bag that hung heavily from her tired fingers. Eleanor lifted her chin, refusing to feel ashamed of her circumstances. "You came all the way from Missouri alone?" "I did, for a housekeeper position." "Fair wages were offered," Eleanor said simply. "I am a hard worker, Mr. Holden. I can cook, clean, mend, garden, and manage a household. I have references from my previous employer, though she has since closed her establishment." Samuel turned his hat in his hands, a gesture that seemed born of nervousness rather than habit. "Miss Morgan, I should be honest with you. I placed that advertisement because I was hoping." He stopped and colour crept up his weathered cheeks. "Hoping for what, Mr. Holden?" "I was hoping a widow might answer, someone looking for a fresh start, someone who might." He cleared his throat. "This is a lonely place, Miss Morgan. The nearest neighbour is 8 miles distant. The town is an hour's walk. I work from sunrise until long past sunset. I thought perhaps a woman of practical nature might see the benefit in a different arrangement." Understanding dawned, and Eleanor felt her own cheeks warm. "You were hoping for a marriage of convenience, something like that." Samuel's voice was gruff with embarrassment. It was foolish. "I apologize for wasting your time. I can offer you supper and a bed for the night before you return to town tomorrow. And if I am not interested in returning—" Samuel looked up sharply. "Pardon?" "I asked for wages, Mr. Holden. I meant it. I need employment, not a husband. But if the position is still available, I would like to discuss terms." For a long moment Samuel simply stared at her. Then something shifted in his expression, something that looked almost like hope, carefully held in check. "The position is available," he said quietly. "But I should warn you, Miss Morgan, this ranch is my whole life. I cannot offer much. The pay would be modest, the work would be hard, and the loneliness—" He paused, looking out over his land with an expression of deep love and deeper sadness. "The loneliness is very real. I have been lonely before, Mr. Holden. I have survived it. Have you?" The question caught Eleanor off guard. She met his eyes and found them searching her face with an intensity that made her breath catch, not in the way men sometimes looked at women with hunger or calculation. Samuel Holden looked at her as though he recognized something in her, something hidden that she had not meant to reveal. "I have survived many things," she said softly. Samuel nodded slowly. "Then perhaps you might survive this place too. The spare room behind the kitchen is clean and private. Wages are $10 a month, plus room and board. Is that acceptable?" $10 was less than she had hoped, but room and board meant food and shelter, and those were worth more than gold to someone who had neither. "It is acceptable," Eleanor said, and just like that, she had a job. The first weeks passed in a blur of work and adjustment. Eleanor scrubbed floors that had not been properly cleaned in months. She beat dust from curtains and rugs until her arms ached. She washed windows until they sparkled and organized a kitchen that had fallen into complete disorder. Samuel Holden barely noticed. He left before dawn each morning, riding out to tend cattle or mend fences or complete whatever endless tasks kept a ranch running. He returned after dark, ate whatever meal Eleanor had prepared in near silence, and then disappeared to his room. On Sundays he drove them both to church in town, but even then he spoke rarely and smiled never. Eleanor told herself it did not matter. She was here for wages, not companionship. She had a warm bed and good food and work that kept her hands busy. That was more than she had possessed in years. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind howled across the prairie and the stars burned cold and distant, Eleanor wondered about the man who had built this beautiful home and filled it with such emptiness. The answer came unexpectedly on an afternoon, when rain drove Eleanor to take shelter in the barn. She had been searching for eggs in the hen house when the sky split open and released a torrent that turned the yard to mud within moments. She ran for the nearest cover and found herself in the dim warmth of the barn, surrounded by the sweet smell of hay and the soft sounds of horses shifting in their stalls. And there, on a rough wooden shelf near the back, she found the photographs. A woman's face smiled at her from a silver frame. She was beautiful, with dark hair and laughing eyes, and a joy that seemed to radiate from the faded image. Beside her stood Samuel, younger and unweathered, smiling with an openness that Eleanor had never seen on his face. More photographs. The same woman holding a baby wrapped in white. The woman and child together in front of the ranch house. The flower boxes bright with blooms. The woman alone, her hand resting on her swollen belly, her smile serene with expectation. Eleanor understood. Then she understood everything. She was still standing there, tears sliding silently down her cheeks, when Samuel found her. "Miss Morgan?" She jumped and spun around, guilt flooding through her. "I am so sorry." "The rain. I did not mean to pry." Samuel's gaze moved to the photographs, and for a moment his carefully constructed walls crumbled entirely. Eleanor saw the grief that lived beneath his silence, the sorrow that had carved those lines around his eyes and built the distance he kept from all living things. "Her snort's name was Margaret," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Maggie. We were married for 2 years. She was the best thing that ever happened to me. And the child, Anna, she was just learning to walk when Samuel stopped, swallowing hard. There was a fever that swept through the territory. They fought for 3 days. I buried them together up on the hill where Maggie used to watch the sunset. Mr. Holden, I am so deeply sorry. It was 4 years ago." Samuel's jaw tightened. "Everyone tells me I should have moved on by now. Started fresh. Found someone new. That is why I placed that advertisement. I thought if I could find someone practical, someone who would not expect love, perhaps I could tolerate sharing this house again. But then you arrived and I realized I'd been fooling myself." "How so?" Samuel looked at her then, truly looked at her, and Eleanor saw something flickering in those coffee-cold eyes, something alive despite all his attempts to bury it. "Because from the moment you walked up that road, worn shoes and worn dress and that stubborn lift to your chin, I felt something. Something I thought had died with Maggie, and it terrified me." Eleanor could not speak. Her heart pounded so loudly she was certain he must hear it. "I have kept my distance because I do not know how to feel again," Samuel continued, his voice rough with confession. "I do not know if I have the right to feel again. Maggie was my world, and when she left, my world ended. How do I build a new one? How do I let go?" "Maybe you do not have to let go," Eleanor said softly. "Maybe you simply have to make room in your heart, in your life. Maggie gave you joy, and that joy does not disappear when someone leaves. It lives in you, in the memories you carry. Making room for new happiness does not mean erasing the old. It means honoring it by continuing to live." Samuel stared at her for so long that Eleanor began to fear she had overstepped terribly. She was merely a housekeeper, hired for wages, speaking to her employer about matters far beyond her station. Then Samuel reached out and gently took her hand. "Miss Morgan, Eleanor, would you walk with me? There is something I would like to show you." They walked through the rain together, though the storm had softened to a gentle mist by the time they reached the hill behind the ranch. 2 simple headstones stood beneath an old oak tree, their surfaces weathered but well tended. "I come here every evening," Samuel said quietly. "I tell about my day, about the ranch, about the things I have seen. It helps me feel less alone." Eleanor said nothing. She simply stood beside him, her hands still wrapped in his, and let the silence speak. "I have not told them about you," Samuel continued. "I was afraid that if I spoke the words aloud, I would have to acknowledge what I was feeling, and I was not ready for that." "What are you feeling, Mr. Holden?" "Samuel, please." He turned to face her, raindrops glistening in his dark hair. "I am feeling hope, Eleanor. For the first time in 4 years, I am feeling hope, and I am terrified it will be taken from me again. I cannot promise you forever." Eleanor said honestly, "No one can promise that, but I can promise you today and tomorrow and as many days as we are given. Is that enough?" Eleanor thought of all the years she had spent running from loss and loneliness, trying to protect herself from pain by keeping everyone at a distance. She thought of the empty rooms she had ended, and the empty meals she had eaten, and the empty future that had stretched before her like a desert without end. And she thought of this man, this gentle, wounded man, who had offered her a job and then offered her something far more precious, his broken heart. "It is enough for me," she said. Samuel raised her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her fingers, so tender that Eleanor felt tears spring to her eyes. "I brought you here to ask for wages," Eleanor whispered. "I never expected." "I offered you a home," Samuel finished, "and I meant it. Not just a room behind the kitchen, not just employment. A real home, Eleanor. A place where you belong, a place where you are wanted." "Samuel, I know it is too soon. I know we barely know each other, but I have learned that life is unpredictable and often cruel, and when something good appears, we must have the courage to reach for it. So I am reaching, Eleanor. I am reaching for you." Eleanor looked into his eyes and saw everything she had never allowed herself to want. A home, a family, a future with someone who saw her not as a worker or a burden, but as a person worthy of love. "Then I will reach too," she said, and there on the hill where his first love rested, Samuel Holden kissed Eleanor Morgan for the first time. It was gentle and sweet, and filled with both sorrow and promise, the kiss of a man learning to hope again, and a woman learning to trust again. Below them the ranch waited, the windows glowing gold as evening approached. The cottonwood trees whispered their silver songs, and the cattle loaded softly in their pastures. A home, Eleanor thought, a real home. They married in autumn when the aspens turned gold, and the air grew crisp with the promise of winter. It was a small ceremony at the church in town, attended by neighbors who had watched Samuel Holden grieve for 4 long years, and now rejoiced to see him smile again. Eleanor wore a dress she had made herself, cream-cold cotton with lace at the collar that she had purchased with her carefully saved wages. Samuel wore his Sunday best and fumbled with his vows because his hands trembled with joy. That evening they stood together on the hill and watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of rose and gold. Samuel spoke quietly to the headstones, telling Maggie and Anna about the woman who had walked up the road with worn shoes and a stubborn chin and changed everything. "Thank you for sending her to me," he whispered. Eleanor slipped her hand into his and squeezed gently. They walked back to the ranch house together, husband and wife, 2 broken people who had found in each other the courage to become whole again. She had asked for wages. He had offered her a home.